Hey, I'm Danielle Doza, and I'm interviewing Linda Apple on Sunday, February 24th, 2008, at her home in Columbus, Ohio. Can you go ahead and say your name for me?
Linda Apple.
And when were you born?
I was born October 22nd, 1946.
Wow. Were you born in Ohio?
Yes, Southern Ohio, down on the river.
Okay. And what is your earliest memory?
I think catching lightning bugs maybe in my backyard or something.
Mm-hmm.
With a little tiny kid.
Did you have any childhood heroes or anything?
Who was the cowboy that had the Hi-Ho Silver?
Hi-Ho Silver.
In a way. Yes, and I wanted to be a cowboy. I thought, that sounded like fun. Yeah. And then there was things, like radios.
Mm-hmm.
More.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't watch TV that much.
Can you tell me about where you went to school, or college or anything after high school or anything?
After high school?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I received a scholarship to go to Columbus College of Art and Design.
Okay.
And I graduated early, and I went there to Columbus College of Art and Design and participated for a while there. And then I experienced going a period of time to Accademia di Roma in Rome.
Wow.
And Ventura College in Ventura, California, a while too. All for art.
And you're still an artist now?
Yes. 41 years professionally.
Wow. What kind of art do you do?
Painting and sculpture. All mediums. I've always loved all mediums. I always thought it was odd to sort of put yourself into very narrow to put yourself into. I'm a watercolorist, or
Mm-hmm.
I've always loved all the mediums, work and sculpture in wood and stone and welded metal and large paintings.
Yeah, I love art. It's really
yeah.
I'm not very good at it, but
it's. I started painting when I was only about 4 or 5 years old. I was into it my whole life. It's all I ever wanted to do. I grew up in a really small little town and very backward, and I always told everybody when I was little that I was going to be a famous artist and travel all over the world. That's all I ever wanted.
So how old were you when you realized that you might be gay?
When I went away to college.
Mm-hmm.
In the town I grew up, I didn't even know what it was. I never really heard about it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know the word gay. I mean, I just I never really heard anything about any of that. Growing up in high school, I felt different. Many kids, though, even if they're not gay, feel odd or out of place or different, I think. But there was something going on. I was attracted to young girls in school, but I didn't know what that was, and I didn't know what that meant.
Right.
From the time I was really little, like 9 or so, I remember being very close with a little girl, a friend of mine. So it started very young, really little, but I didn't really understand any of that. The tradition was, of course, you go to school or you grow up and you get married and you have kids. I mean, was life. You know, that was sort of what happened.
How old were you when you first, I guess, encountered, or was it in college when you first encountered other gay people? Or
when I went to art college, I remember meeting. That's when I first met gay people, homosexuals. We didn't even call them gay much.
Really?
No. Pretty much. It was pretty much a term, bulldyke or femme or queer or homosexual. It was pretty blunt, and it wasn't said very often. I mean, it was very secretive. I mean, people didn't talk about it and didn't say it much, and you weren't out much. They didn't say anything much about it. And that's when I met a woman who is still a friend of mine to this day. She was probably my first person that I actually found out and knew, that. And I had a gay French or Italian man that I met that I knew, and he was the one that took me to the first gay bar.
What bar was that?
Oh my God, I don't remember the name. I tried last night to remember the name of it. I mean, look, that's 41 years ago or more. It was like, I don't really remember, but I remember that it was in a really bad section of town. All of them were then. It was out on the east side, like Hamilton and something.
Okay.
It was like, but in a real bad section that you really wouldn't want to go to. But
did you tell anyone that you were gay when you started realizing this, or did you talk to anyone about it?
I got married.
Did you?
Yeah. I got married. I didn't know. I didn't tell anyone, and I didn't know what it was. I had a very traumatic time in college because I kept getting attracted to my roommates, and it was. But I still didn't really understand what my feelings were. Right. I just felt like I didn't fit in. Something was wrong with me. I didn't fit in, and I happened to meet a man who had been an instructor at the college, not when I was there. It was before me. But when we first met, we became really good friends immediately. And I always laughed and told him later and others, that he really ended up, he was probably the closest thing I could have got to a woman without being a woman.
Right.
He was just so loving and so sweet and gentle, fabulous artist, brilliant man, musician, a painter, a sculptor, and he was actually we married because he was the first person that I felt that I ever met that I really, truly related to. He understood everything, and we were very bonded and just like brother and sister. I mean, it was really wonderful, and we just fell right into it, and we were both artists and wild and crazy and independent, and so we got married very quickly. We just, within a very short period of time, got together, got married, and that was that. But it didn't last. I mean, technically, the marriage didn't last long.
How long were you married for?
Well, we were technically legally married for 3 years. Okay. But we stayed lifelong friends forever. Always bonded. I just lost him last year. So this year, and it was very sad. He was 20 years my senior, see. So it wasn't like this. it wasn't even really funny. It really wasn't even like a male-female bonding, really. I mean, we were intimate, obviously. I had a child by him. But it was way beyond that. It was more like just this soul, wonderful match of people. And we just stayed bonded. It was really, it is unusual, I guess. But he never remarried, and I didn't either.
Okay.
It's just one of those things that occurred. I always believed that. I knew John because I was supposed to meet him to have my son. And that was the reason, I think. And I always felt that.
How old's your son now?
He's 40,
Okay.
41.
Does he live in the Columbus area?
Yes, he lives
Okay.
not far away.
That's nice.
Which is wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's married and has a daughter.
Okay. So what other types of relationships have you had after marriage?
Well, I came out when I was married.
Okay.
I did not come out here. I came out in Europe.
Okay. Was this when you were in Rome, or?
Yeah, I went to Rome and was there. Met a woman there and came out in Rome. It was very romantic. The traumas that people had during that time, coming out was extremely traumatic for most. I would hear very, very traumatic coming out stories. And many did not come out. When I came out, and I was out to the world, and I stayed that way. But most did not, because it was dangerous. It was affected work, life, everything. So you didn't do that. I had a great experience. I went there I was, and met somebody and had my experience, and it was fantastic. And continued a relationship for several years, traveling back and forth, actually. And so when I came back, it was like, well, sorry, this is it.
Right.
I just felt that was what I've been missing all my life.
Did you find it more accepting in Europe as opposed to the United States at all?
Yeah.
During that time?
Yes, it was. We walked down the street together holding hands.
Really?
They would snicker and point at us and call us
Right.
lesbicus and stuff. I mean, but it wasn't horrible or, anything like that.
Have you experienced any discrimination here in Ohio at all, or even in the United States?
When?
During, I guess, any time.
Oh my God. My whole life has been discriminated
Really?
until, oh yeah. I mean, it was really rough. I mean, you just, it was terrible. I mean, here in the States, I was always out, but I always ran many risks for lots of things. I had to try to let my son understand when he was really tiny that our lives were private, and what it was, I explained to him exactly why, in my view, what it was, what I was doing, but it had to be kept totally private because they would take your child away from you.
Really?
Oh, yes.
Wow.
Social services could intercede and take your child away from you if they felt it warranted, if they wanted to.
Oh my goodness.
Oh,
I've never heard that before.
Oh, really? Oh, yes. That was a very scary thing. I was always terrified that somebody was going to do something to me that way, and because I was out and I marched and I protested and I did lots of things and often took John when he was really little to all those things, but under great protest from him. But I drug him along anyway, basically because I didn't have money for babysitters and things, so I had to take him.
What kind of protests were you involved in, or rallies or anything?
You name it, I was there.
Was that mostly in the Columbus area or even all over?
I mean, I couldn't try. Like I say, I was an artist. I was. I did work other jobs when John was little, raising him, regular jobs, and I still did my art too. But I couldn't travel. I didn't have money to go around and travel and everything. So I was very out. It became very mixed. Everything became very mixed at the time. There were many things going on. It wasn't just being gay. That created a lot of energy and strength to which also was put into many other things, avenues. I mean, there was Vietnam War, protesting that, marching. The Kent State episode happened. You get out and march against those things, and National Guard helicopters are flying over you. You saw guns. It was not a fun time, and in amongst all that, you're gay and you're trying to establish rights. The feminist movement was really, it came out of lesbians and separatists, angry and fighting and for rights. I mean, it's just trying to get some semblance of sanity in all of it. And then you had the people like Anita Bryant. Did you know about her? Oh, wow. She was fun. She was in the 70s, and she was in the 60s. She had won Miss America runner-up. She was a right-to-lifer extremist. She was advertised she was big for Florida orange juice. Okay. So she was the promoter of Florida orange juice, and she was on TV for right to life thingies, and she was the most obnoxious bigot. She was awful. She was horrible. She raised great anger with gays, and I remember going down to in front of Vets Memorial when she arrived in Columbus. It's probably 71 or so, I don't know, around that time, and marching against her because how horrible she was. She was just terrible, trying to stave all rights for against abortion and everything. And to this day, they use her. She's dead, thank heavens. Sorry, I'm glad she's gone. Use her legacy. Save our children.
Right. Today
for protesting and trying to get Roe versus Wade turned.
Right.
That was another thing, abortion and abortion rights. And in the early parts, in the late 60s, it was fighting for abortion rights. To have the freedom of your body and stuff. Women didn't have it. You didn't have that. Right. So many women died, and it was terrible. You have women raped and everything, and then they try to get an abortion, and they die having an abortion because it wasn't legal. It was horrible. And so you're fighting for that, and it was sort of like the gay. It just melded into one huge pot.
Really?
I mean, of always in this angst and fighting and trying to win over for something and fight against being humiliated or treated differently or because, I mean, it's really awful to be a woman, a single parent, gay, and all at the same time and within that time range. It was not a good thing. But so music became an avenue for the energy and the strength, the women. I mean, you didn't have women on labels. I mean, unless you were an opera or something. I mean, some famous operatic singer or something occurred. I mean, it just wasn't much there at all. I mean, that didn't happen till the early 70s, and that was with women like Chris Williamson and Meg Christensen and Holly Near and who they're forerunners, and Kay Gardner, and to create women's music, which gave now the freedom for all of these women you see on the records now singing and doing their thing and becoming famous and that was unheard of. That just didn't happen. That was not. Women could succeed and become something within dance, like ballet was accepted, and the arts were the same way. Visual arts, and they still have a hard time. Women still have a fighting time in visual arts, but it was quite a stigma. You be a woman and be in the arts like that, you just didn't get recognition. And so, I mean, I don't think the first real main one was till like 72 or something on for women's music and women's labels.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
They became separatists, radical and separatists in the early 70s.
What is your view on that?
Well, I'll tell you my experiences on that. I was sort of just going along doing my thing, and I remember one really major experience that what traumatized me. It started becoming very difficult to be a gay woman with a male child. There started a buzz of you couldn't be a lesbian and feminist and have a male child. That was impossible. They just like forbid it. It was not accepted. Consequently, here I am in the middle of all of it, and I have this little boy, and there were other women. It angered me terribly at the time, I remember, because I became very outcast, because there were other women in the community, a few other women in the community, lesbian community at the time, that had children, and they had girls. Well, if they wanted to go somewhere or take a vacation or go out for the night even, they had numerous other lesbian women who would babysit their daughter.
Right.
If I was in that position, there was no one.
Wow.
No one out there to babysit my male child. It just wasn't available much. I mean, it was like you really had to seek it out. It just didn't happen. They weren't available.
Right.
And then I remember the Michigan Women's Festival happened. Okay. Now, the first one, I don't remember the exact year of the first one. I went to the very first one. It was an outlet, obviously, for gathering. It was one of the very first times that women actually had a place where they could go and be themselves.
Mm-hmm.
The first ever for many, because they could not be that way at home. They could not be that way in their town, in their work, in their home, right, or around family or anything. It was many people were not out, so it just was a huge hit because they had never had this experience before.
Right.
Many of them, and so obviously it also became very political in the beginning. You got a lot of politics going on there because they're in this place all together, and then they're like, oh, we can't have this. We need this. We can't have that. And all these politics started coming in. And after a couple of years, I remember going, and there came this huge movement, which was which was all involved with male children and bonding, and it got to the point that I remember them on stage making statements such as you cannot you couldn't take your child there no matter how young if it was a male, they couldn't come. And then that women should, if they were lesbian and they wanted to have a child, then you get artificial insemination, get tested, and if it's a boy, abort.
Wow.
Now,
really?
You talk about extreme. That really was the total extreme memory that always stuck in my head. It just horrified me. I just could not imagine them getting to that point. And they were doing that. Mm-hmm. Women were doing that. There were women that did that. And, but when you look at it, to get to the point to be able to make something happen, things often have to go to the extreme. You have movements and things, and I found, for me, I believe that it's like just anything in life. Something happens, you have to go through sort of like a period of mourning, sort of, mm-hmm. and then anger. If you don't, and then resolve. And if you don't go through this anger, it just seems to not happen. And I mean, anger is not a bad thing. It's how you use it. Mm-hmm. that makes it work. I mean, you have to have it, really. And it's part of all of it. It's part of all the movements. I mean, anything is the same with fighting the Vietnam War. Right. You go through shock and mourning and tragedy and then anger and fighting and then finally come to some sort of resolve. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was many parts of myself that understood exactly what they were doing.
Right.
And I could see why they were doing it. But obviously it created many women to become outcast, such as myself.
Yeah.
That, and fighting then, trying to get them to understand that this is insane. You can't go to this extreme. I mean, women saying things like, if we can get rid of all the men, that would be good, Right. I mean, just really everything was sort of culminating to this extreme. I mean, it faded. I mean, it sort of moved on to other things. Right. And but there were times that it was pretty hairy. I mean, interesting. I mean, it's all, to look back on it now, it's all becomes very interesting to me to sort of, when you're mixed up in all of it for a long time, you don't realize really that you actually went through all those things until you sort of sit and think about it.
Yeah. Did you feel like you belonged in the lesbian community, even though these radical lesbians were so, I guess, discriminating even against other lesbians? Did you feel like you had a sense of belonging, or you felt like you were, doing something positive for this movement?
Yeah, well, when it got to that point, I just sort of stayed away from those women. And I would tell them, well, that's your problem. I don't have a problem with it. That's how it sort of became finally for me, Right. So that's your view. You have a problem with that. I do not have a problem, obviously, with it. But I think, yes, there were always women that you could relate to. I mean, as far as, I was one of the women we started the very first Radical Lesbian group in Columbus.
Really?
And that was probably 1970, something like that. Around that time, we just called ourselves the Radical Lesbians. We were a small group. We would meet. Most of us actually were mothers. And we would just get together and talk about how awful this was or how awful that was, and what should we do and what could we say, or how should we be, how can we exist in this. I mean, it was just laid back get together group. I mean, we just get together at someone's house, sit around, have munchies, maybe a beer, sit there and talk and hang out and have pizza or whatever. And we never really, I don't think as a group, got anything accomplished, but it was support.
Right.
It was just a support thing. And there were only about, I think at the max, there were only probably 8 or 10 of us. It was very small. I also started moving more into finding my own voice for it. I mean, what could I do? Like you had these threats if you were a mother. So with a child, and so I sort of had to be cautious in a way of how I'm going to utilize my energy and what I do that I could make an effect. Marching, like I said, going to the marches and protesting someone, like Anita Bryant was always popular. We liked doing that. And then we would have parades or march. And it was, there were lots of things happening that were very dangerous. I mean, the bars then, the very early bars, they were all mixed, men and women. You didn't have the luxury of having just a women's bar, just mostly a male bar or anything. You were lucky to have a bar at all. So, and they were very few of them. We had maybe three in town, that they were all in really horrible areas. Scary. One was on Cleveland Avenue.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
Around just south of Hudson or around. It was real scary there. And then one out east, and then there was one sort of south town of the city, just sort of in the. They were all very scary, and they had, the funny thing was, they had the way they set them up was they made them so to go to the bar when you're going in. All of them had this little entry room, like just a tiny little space where there was protective glass with a little opening, and someone would sit behind there, and you would pay or whatever them to get in. Okay. Well, anyone that was truly they knew was gay or anything never really paid. It was a catch-all to try to know when police were coming or to something like that.
Okay.
See? So if you were going to be raided or the police were coming. So if the police showed up, they had a special button that they could push. And what would happen is, so you're in the other big room, and everyone's in there drinking and partying and dancing. And so if the police came, this red light would go off, and it would go swirling around or flash or something. And if that occurred, then you would immediately switch partners on the dance floor. Like, so if 2 men and 2 women were dancing together, you would immediately switch when the light went off, and whoever's closest to you, you turn around, hi Sam, and you start dancing with Sam, and so there was a lot more camaraderie actually in the bar. So I always felt that it was a lot of bonding. You felt very close with everybody, even more so, I think, a lot than it is now. We were all one. We were all fighting for the same thing. Right. We were all persecuted, so not one more than the other most. So you just sort of stood up for each other and helped each other. And so that was one of the big fun things about it. So if the cop showed up, you'd switch partners and dance, and the police would walk in and they'd be like, trying to find out what was going on. And they knew it was a gay bar. But so the other thing that was going on they would do is, like, they would go out into the parking lots or on the street, and they would take down license plate numbers of the cars of the people attending. And so then if there was a violation and they pulled you over and your license plate was on that list, you got really bad. You were really horribly mistreated. And I mean, you did not walk down the street, especially men, holding hands or anything. I remember specifically a young man. I don't remember his name. He was the handsomest young guy. So sweet. They just stopped, and he was walking down the street with his lover holding hands, and they just picked him up and took him down to the station, and by the time he got out, he was beaten so badly he nearly died. He was beaten so badly.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
there were a lot of cruel things going on then. I mean, that's the way it was.
Right.
I mean, you're a freak, you're a queer, you're a fag, you're awful, just horribly humiliating and degrading. They did everything they could to humiliate and degrade people. Everything they could. So I think in sort of some ways, it wasn't a matter of hiding, but it was a matter of sort of always being very cautious.
Right.
Funny, being an artist, it was kind of funny that people a long time ago always used to have sort of weird views of artists are weird, or they're out there, they're kind of oddball weird. I think I got away with a lot more than some did.
Yeah.
And could be stranger. I mean, I was, like I said, very outspoken. And, she's just a weird artist.
She's an artist.
I was more accepted more easily.
In like the general
public? Yeah.
Okay.
I think, but because I happen to be an artist,
right.
They sort of like overlooked some of that. I had figured out that I felt that I could have more of an effect with my art for women and for the movement and for gay rights and by being an artist. My early work was a lot of the work in the early 70s was very political. I was out to do art for women, which did not pay, I'm telling you. Financially was a total disaster.
Right.
I mean, I was doing art for women who appreciated looking at it but had no money.
Right. Yeah.
It did not, help me in that way. So, I mean, I did it a lot because a lot of my anger came out in the work.
Right.
And so making statements politically that way. I also got into music.
Okay.
Yeah, we had during the time when at first women were just starting to early 70s. Women. Yeah, I had a women's rock band.
Okay.
We were a group of lesbians. We called ourselves Mother's Pride. We lasted for about 5 years.
Wow.
And playing. We were too early. There were only a couple women's rock bands or women with bands that had even been out there.
Right.
Fanny and Bertha, I think. And it was the same time, right during that time. And in Columbus, Ohio, it was like unheard of,
Right.
And we had our slogan, which was, we would get really harassed, and they would, we traveled in Ohio some, in different places, but if there was a benefit, we were always called. But paying gigs was another thing.
Right.
We would get a gig and go, it would be out of town someplace, and we'd show up, and they wouldn't know that we were an all-women's group.
Oh.
So people would start freaking out and thinking, oh, God, this is going to be a bad night or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, they would really end up liking us usually, but you'd get men saying really crude things to you. So we would say things back to them like, I don't need balls to play.
Yeah.
Things. We make up little slogans and things to say to them.
Right.
So we did the music to try to, as groups.
Is there a time in your life where you felt like you didn't have to be so cautious about this? Like you felt safe about being gay in public or?
No. Never. Not even today.
Do you see any changes today as far as, gay rights? Like, are you happy with any changes or? what would you like seeing done?
I think, well, by the time the 80s happened, I was burnt out on it. And we had rights. Things were not too bad.
Mm-hmm.
Things were moving along, positive direction. I expected the young women to take over.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't happen. What actually happened was that many of the rights were there and developed and working and functioning, and that then that young age group that was coming in that should have been where I had been,
Mm-hmm.
Didn't really understand what had happened before. So they basked in the sunlight of what had occurred. They enjoyed the freedoms they were having and continued to enjoy those freedoms without having to fight for them or anything. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, with our presidents that we've had, I mean, Nixon was horrible, you know. Right. I mean, he hit hard. I mean, it was kind of a shock. That's the thing. I mean, it went on for a long time, just sort of young gals just sort of enjoying their lives, you know, and living, which everyone should. But then all of a sudden it would be sort of this huge shock. They wouldn't see it coming. Really? And something would happen.
Yeah.
And then they would go, what? They can't do that.
Yeah.
What are they doing? They can't do that, and be shocked and freaked. But yes, they can. Mm-hmm. They always can. I'm telling you, I'll speak right out about it. Bush is horrible. He has put us back into the dark ages. And I knew it when he was going to get in it, and it hasn't changed. It's horrible. He has, one of his very first acts he did was, as president, was to that, what they call it, the thing, the bill where it take monies away from any for abortion, for centers for abortions, rights, and I mean that was horrible. It was the first thing he did.
Yeah,
and they're always fighting the Roe versus Wade still, and I'm telling you, I mean, it's like, it's horrible. He's taken women and women's rights and many people's rights, not only just women or gays, but people's rights back.
Yeah. Many
years, 20 years or more. I mean, it's just horrifying. And it continues. I mean, it's a non-ending thing. And if anyone thinks that they can sit back and not protest when something that they don't like occurs, they have to get off their rumps and do something, because one small thing leads to many. I think if I learned anything at all from all of it, is that I've learned that you take away one human being's rights, then you're in danger, because your life is threatened. It doesn't matter who it is. When you take away rights of some person for their race or their sexuality or their decisions or something, then you're threatened beyond what they can take yours next. Mm-hmm. People, I think especially women, need to know to be strong and voice their opinions.
Right.
I don't go out and march up and down the street yelling I'm a lesbian.
No.
It really isn't important to me that much. I mean, who knows whether or not I'm lesbian? I've always been out. Mm-hmm. But if I'm questioned or I'm confronted, look out. because I don't hesitate.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all that I went through would be a lie at this point if I did not stand up. Everything that I stood for before would mean nothing.
Mm-hmm.
That means nothing if you don't. I mean, what is your life? I mean, that's just been my life. It is. I stood up for it. I did those things, but it's not like I live and breathe everything every day.
Right.
First off, I'm a human being,
Yeah.
Then I'm a woman, maybe, or a mother even first.
Mm-hmm.
And then a woman. And down the line, I'm gay. But it's not that it is in the forefront of who I am, of everything that I am. Mm-hmm. But it has guided my life because the persecution of people,
right.
During all these years, I can't deny it.
Right.
I mean, I could, but why bother at this point? I think I'm always threatened. I don't know whether that's just paranoia. I don't believe it is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really remember any time from the time I came out that I have not felt threatened in one way or another. Well, I guess if I was to add anything, it would just be strong, be out there, stand up for what is right. People to be able to live their lives in an honorable way is right. And no matter, what, just be there for that and to understand that it can all go away tomorrow. There is no guarantees. There are no guarantees. Right.